Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Zach Meckler.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name's Joe Kuzma, and today I'm joined by, we love to call him the professor of football, one Zach Meckler. I like to call him a draft geek, draft nerd, draft dork, all rolled up into one, which I guess goes along with if you're a professor, I guess you got to be a little nerdy. Am I right, Zach? How's it going, man?
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of the moniker. You kind of have to own it. If you don't, then, you're just making fun of yourself, so I'm all for it.
Oh, man, we make fun of draft Twitter enough, don't we?
Oh, I live and breathe that lifestyle to make fun of draft Twitter, and it's fine. I mean, because I'm an unofficial part of it. Like, I don't post my takes very frequently on Twitter, so I got to try to stay away from all that nonsense to protect myself from getting trolled more than I already do by the masses.
Oh, it's everybody. You know what? I have to put this out here as the very first thing, and it's, well, first of all, Brian's been ducking me, and it's okay. We'll catch up with him eventually. So I think we'll have plenty to talk about. Maybe even all three of us we'll have something to talk about. We got one more show after this one before the draft, and we'll probably be looking, I don't know, we'll probably make fun of some other mock drafts. That's probably what's going to end up happening. And I thought it was just interesting. What was it? Daniel Jeremiah says, he put out this tweet not too long ago. What was it, last night? And he says, I believe we'll see less groupthink in the draft this year. At pro days, coaches and scouts from different teams spend so much time around each other, and they end up forming a consensus on players. That's not the case this year. Some will be shocked at how high-low these guys go. And Ian Rappaport, of course, responds to this and said, I had a GM tell me the media is wronger about mock drafts this year than you guys have ever been. Point being, players are going to be taken in places no one expects. And I was just like, this is just my shocked face of, you may as well put this out here right now. I think the one thing that maybe, hopefully we do a little different here is we admit that we're more than likely, going to be 95% wrong. I mean, even the top picks, I mean, you think about some of the things that happen. I just saw the Falcons tweet out something, too, about how they hit on the Julio Jones pick. Oh, that worked out okay. And that, I forgot, the Browns that was a Browns trade, too, wasn't it? They traded and moved, and yet another player they missed on. But those are things that are going to happen. You can never, ever guess. I don't even think the teams themselves can guess. They're going to attempt to do something. The Steelers tried to attempt to move up 2 years ago for an inside linebacker. Didn't happen. Last year, everybody had them pegged to do that. They didn't know what trade partner they might get or if they would even do it, because we thought, hey, you know what, Kevin Colbert, he's a little stingy on giving up these picks, and we'll talk about that a little more just in a second. I do have a little bit of other housekeeping here. I did get everyone's messages since I haven't been on here in like a week or so. I've been getting the messages for the tailgate and the game in Jacksonville that everyone may be interested in doing this little early bird. I do have a price attached to this now as well, because the packages for a tailgate with an open bar, unlimited food, and a game ticket. Now, mind you, these start at $145. It'll change depending on where you want to sit. That's basically how it boils down to. So they start at $145. If you still think that there will be a football season and this is something you want to go and do later in the fall, this is no commitment. This is just interest. So if you have an opportunity, we do have some ways for you to get in touch with us and let us know. Of course, there's social media. You could always DM us on one of the platforms that we're on. We have the hotline, which is 203-900-4SCU. You could just shoot us a text there. Let us know if you're interested. And also fan mail at steelcityunderground.com. We're wrapping up on this at the beginning of the week. I'm going to send over the information to Gameday Tailgate Experience, and then this opportunity will close. So make sure you get in on this if you're listening between now and over the weekend, because then I think the prices will go up. This is a thing that they have to set with the Jacksonville Jaguars as far as a commitment and how many tickets are allotted and things like that. So, we're kind of tying it together. It's a game ticket. It's a big tailgate party, and hope to see yins down there. Hopefully we get back to normal here sometime soon. But as I was saying, Zach, it's never normal for you or I. So, it would be nice. I got a buddy that was going down to Florida. He's self-quarantined. He's been furloughed. He was on his way down there yesterday to see. He's had a long-distance relationship with a girlfriend, and, she has a daughter. So now they're finally going to hook up. And he's a single guy. He's been living by himself. So I'm like, good for you. Go to Florida, man. What else you got to do? And, that's, kind of where we're at right now. So if you're thinking, this is something you want to do, $145, not only for a game ticket, but the tailgate. Not trying to hard sell people, but if you've ever gone to any NFL game, that's good just for a ticket by itself. So definitely take advantage of this. Should be nice weather, and there'll be tons of Steelers fans down there as there was before. But as I was saying, we're all holed up. Your draft boards and stuff, you guys like you, Chase, I know Derek was working on his and he's kind of gone off the grid here too, but you guys are just changing this stuff up to the last minute. What can really change right now with like there's no pro days. It's just like virtual stuff. You're not really seeing the tape of like the workouts. I know the players are still doing some workouts. They have like a script. So if you're like a quarterback, they want to see you make a certain throw or do a certain drill, and then it's getting filmed and sent to all these NFL teams. So everybody has the same information, trying to make it fair, you know what I mean, in these the new normal, different times. So how much of that can actually change your rankings or what changes it? Just a little bit of gossip or hearsay? Because I know, like we were just saying, you're not really into the draft Twitter changing opinions here.
Yeah, I think for me, I can't attest to Chase and Derek, but I know for me, a lot of it comes down to me wanting this to be as perfect as I feel comfortable with. And I know I can't speak for like NFL teams, obviously, or anything like that. But when I look at my big board and my positional rankings, I don't want there to be any ranking or position I don't feel good about. And I don't look a whole lot of the especially these virtual pro day videos, because you have guys that are running 4.6s at the combine, and now magically they're being clocked at a 4.29 or 4.3, and I'm like, I think the times might be a little bit off at the combine, but I don't trust a trainer with a stopwatch in his hand making it an official time at the pro days.
No way. You know why? Hold on. You know why? Because I've actually done this with different testing. You may have too. Have you ever done it with electronic gates versus someone using a stopwatch? They got to get, there's you're 40 meters or 40 yards apart, and one guy is going to be at the end of the cone. And he's not going to chase the guy with the stopwatch, so you're kind of guessing as to when he starts and stops, and you may even shave like a fraction of the time off to make it look good. It's the same thing as like height and weight, right? You're beefing up the stats. So unless they have the electronic gates will automatically go. I think you could do this with smartphones, but probably not as precise. But the actual equipment they would use for like a track and field or like a combine testing is going to be the most accurate way, because it's going to start and stop. They're all linked together. You know what I mean?
Exactly, and that's why I don't discount the stopwatches, but there's such a level of human error with that. If you don't start precisely with the second they take off and precisely the second they get through the line, so it's nice to see some of these guys that had such abysmal times put up better numbers, but I don't put a lot of stock into that. But so a lot of my deal is just wanting to feel good about my big board. I want to see the rankings to be how I feel they should be, and obviously I'm going to have a high level of error, just like every draft Twitter person out there. Newsflash to them is going to have a high level of error when it comes to this, because we can have a big board ranking. It's not going to be perfect. There's going to be trades that happen. Guys are going to go before and later than you think you should. We're going to be higher on a prospect than, the league execs might be higher on. I always look back to the Artie Burns deal, where you have, most of draft Twitter saying they had a second and third round grade on her, but if you consult with a lot of the NFL reports around that time and afterwards, there was a lot of rumblings that Artie Burns was going to go in the first round. The Steelers didn't take him when they did. He was going to tumble a little bit further in the first round, like the 28th pick or something like that with the Cardinals. So, it shouldn't be that surprising. So I just like to have the positions where I want them to be, where I feel happy with them being, especially this year since I'm doing a bigger big board than I normally do. I normally top 400. Now I'm doing, 350 for all those of you that are listening. It's a lot of prospects that I want to feel good about, and obviously there's going to be a lot of parity in the probably about the 150 to the 300 range, because there's going to be guys that go earlier or later just based on when teams pick, what their needs are, whatever. But I typically every year feel good about my big board, and a lot of it's just tweaking and going back and saying, this is really how I wanted. Did I miss something with this guy? Did I overlook something with him, or did I give him too much credence in this one particular area? And a lot of things like that. And I know a lot of times at this time of the year, I know Kevin Colbert has mentioned it, a lot of these GMs have their big boards pretty much already locked up, and there's very little movement And the whole moniker of guys flying up and down big boards, I think, is overdone. I think a lot of times, like I look at a guy like Adam Troutman, draft Twitter got a hold of him.
Bingo.
You're telling me right now that NFL GMs and executives had never heard of him before? Come on. Like they knew who Adam Troutman was. Draft Twitter was just late to the party catching up to him. And I'm not going to lie, I had no really idea who Adam Troutman was before this entire thing. But I'm not going to sit here and say that 32 NFL executives had no idea who Adam Troutman is. And because of the Senior Bowl, he's going to go skyrocketing into the stratosphere. They knew who he was. He was already on their radar. Players like that, I don't believe in the whole he's shooting up big boards. I think a lot of times draft Twitter's just late to the party. These boards are already settled, and a lot of it's just tweaking and preference. And, obviously for them, they have the virtual visits and things like that. They may pull guys off the board because, traditionally they don't have 350 people on their big board like I do, of guys who they'd want to take. So I think a lot of it's just preference, just tweaking and, doing things to make you feel really good about it. Because a lot of people hold these things in high regard. This is their child. They look forward to doing this every year like I do. And you want it to be as perfect as it can be. And people look at different things, but mine's just more so I want to make sure that the guys are where I want them to be. And I feel good about my position rankings and how they ultimately fit together my big board. I want to see a guy where, I have him very high on my big board, like a top 50 player, but in reality, I'm like, I have a 3rd round grade on him. That doesn't add up. So I want to make sure there's some level of agreement between the two groupings, and it all makes sense to me.
You've said it all. I like to pick your brain, and I love when you say you're doing things bigger. We just said this off the air. And you're like, oh, it's even bigger than last year, and I'm like, it's probably means Zach isn't even going to get it up on the website by Thursday. You've been working on this thing like all year long. You're probably already working on 2021, if I know you.
Yeah, I have names. I have names on the list. Let's put it that way.
Okay. But you know what? The Steelers. I wanted to look at this kind of like, not necessarily always just what they're. How do I want to phrase this? What side of the ball they're really going to lean on. I think a lot of people assume offense, but as we look at each pick, obviously they don't have a pick until the 2nd round. They gave up their 1st round pick, so essentially their 1st round pick already is defense this year for Minkah Fitzpatrick, which I don't think anybody's arguing with anymore, right? No debate. And that ended up being pick 18. You weren't going to get Minkah or anybody like Minkah with the 18th pick overall in this year's draft. I don't care what position they were looking at. Obviously a 1st round pick's a 1st round pick, but you know what I mean. So it's been since 2012 since you're going back and you look at the top pick that the Steelers have used on an offensive player. That was on David DeCastro. They double dipped at guard and then a tackle with Mike Adams. The previous years before that were Cam Hayward with the 1st pick, and Marquise Pouncey in 2010 was the top overall pick as well. So you look at the Steelers usually kind of like fluctuate, you know what I mean? They're not always going to go like offense. Now, they've been very defensive, heavy-handed, but besides Pouncey, I mean, you go back to Ziggy Hood, it's really when's the last time they took a running back? 2008, Rashard Mendenhall with one of their top overall picks, right? The top pick, 1st round pick. Santonio Holmes with a 1st round pick in 2006. Obviously, we know the 2nd round picks, they've taken guys like Le'Veon Bell, Juju Smith-Schuster, James Washington. So there's been wide receivers and running backs that have been taken, but they've always been taken after defense. So when I go and I look at the 1st pick that the Steelers have, 49 overall, and in fact, we were just talking about this too. It's going to be a very boring Thursday. It's going to be very bizarre altogether because you don't have a stage. You don't have, at least you don't have the fans, except for, I hope they have some virtual booing kind of piped in for Goodell, but that would be kind of cool. But I guess EA Sports is supposed to do they're supposed to superimpose, do something graphically, maybe the way they would model each of these guys for a video game to go on the stage and everything like that. But it really hit home that, they were custom printing jerseys for these guys with their names. They have draft hats in the back. I don't know how this works. Are you going to have New Era send 32 draft caps to each of the top 50 prospects, maybe, just so they get to put one of them on? You know what I mean? They kind of lose out on some of it. It kind of sucks. But I guess for overall, they still know they're going to be a professional football player. They still know they're getting drafted. All of those experiences are going to be good. I guess just for the top part of the class, the guys that would usually be in the green room, this is going to be a little different. For everybody else, they're going to be sitting by the phone anxiously biting their fingernails and everything like that as usual. So I turn around and I go and I look at, at the Steelers. You get to 49. I mean, I don't even know that it's somebody that they're going to be able to Skype with, you know what I mean, by the time they get there. But we've seen some interesting names. We all run these mock drafts, so we know they can be wrong, and there's some names that pop up here or there. And I know you guys hammered some of this, and even myself and Brian have hammered this in recent episodes, but it's really at pick 49. What do you do if, let's say, some of the top safeties are there, a top linebacker drops, or you have your pick of the litter with running backs, or only maybe a few wide receivers go off the board? You've already used your first-round pick on a safety, on a starting all-pro safety in Minkah Fitzpatrick. So is it necessarily... when we first started doing this, in fact, I think you and Brian, wasn't it Thaddeus Moss? We put as like the cover image or whatever for the episode. We were thinking tight end. Well, nobody's saying that anymore. I don't hear anybody. It's gotten really quiet. I'm glad you brought up Adam Troutman. It's gotten really quiet about that, hasn't it? And I don't know if it's just that in our circles we have a lot of Steelers fans that now, okay, they signed Ebron, so I don't know, because the Steelers still, I don't think they're going to look at a tight end that early. And I think you agree that the class isn't that good maybe to use a second-round pick on a guy, particularly Moss even, or Troutman, if you want to get very specific. But now that they have those two guys, I got to boomerang back around the tight end just for a second, too, because I think a lot of people just assume running back, wide receiver. Okay, we know James Conner's in the last year of a rookie contract. We know Juju is, too. We know both of them were banged up and they had down years last year. We know a lot of that had to do with what? Injuries all over the offense, particularly at the quarterback position, and a lot of inconsistency there. So are the Steelers thinking the same way, that they need some of these other positions? When everyone was thinking tight end, they were thinking, well, Vance McDonald, banged up, never available, which necessarily wasn't true. I've been banging my drum about this, other than the offensive line, and usually, offensive linemen never come off the field unless they're suspended or hurt, as was the case with Ramon Foster and or Marquise Pouncey last season. They play 100% of the season. Very rarely do they come off. Maybe there's a penalty. Maybe they get dinged. They lose their helmet, have to come off the field for a play, and that's it. These guys don't leave the field. So when you're saying Vance McDonald played the most snaps of anyone that wasn't one of those 5 starting offensive linemen, that means he was healthy last year, healthier than anybody else. But the fact of the matter is, he's only got a year or 2 left on his contract. Ebron signed a 2-year deal. When you look at some of this, I don't know necessarily with pick 49 that they would go tight end, but we can discuss as we continue going along whether or not they may focus on that. So when you wrap all of this up, Zach, I'm trying to think. I don't know if running back's necessarily a shoe-in. I don't know if offensive line's necessarily a shoe-in. What if 6 or 8 tackles are off the board? Are you going to go with a guard when you got one of these maybe top 5 receivers or top 5 running backs sitting there staring you in the face?
Yeah, it's a unique situation. I know I've mentioned before, and we've talked about this in the back channels, but the Steelers are in a really good position right now, in my opinion, to kind of go wherever their board's going to take them because of how they kind of went about addressing free agency. I mean, I know Eric Ebron's probably not going to turn a lot of heads when it comes to longevity with the team. Obviously, it's a 2-year deal. There's a chance they could turn in the longer if he, proves his worth here. But at the end of the day, he's not a massive blocking guy, and I think everyone knows that his chops have been made as a receiving threat. And you have to still look at the fact that they could save money with Vance McDonald down the road as well. So it's going to come down to preference with that. But furthermore, you look at trading for a guy like Chris Wormley. They were able to go out and make some financially smart moves, and I think they did a very good job. Steven Wisniewski. I think those allowed them to kind of go wherever the flow of the board's going to take them, and it's going to come down to who do they like a lot at that position and where who's available. And I think realistically, it should be offense. I think they should do something to fortify that offense. They've invested so much premium draft capital since 2013 on that defense, and they've gone back and they've looked at linebackers, edge rushers, safeties, cornerbacks, you name it. The defense right now, for all intents and purposes, outside of Javon Hargrave, the most crucial contributors are all back next year. There was a lot of worry about Mike Hilton and Bud Dupree. They're all back next year at the minimum. So that defense is going to be intact, all things considering, from what we saw in 2019. The offense, on the other hand, showed its ineptitude even with the injuries. You needed to have some more firepower on that side of the ball, especially if you're going to try to maximize Big Ben's window. And I think that's the thing that should be driving their thoughts, is how can we maximize Ben's window, and also look at the fact that even regardless without the injuries, you have a very interesting free agency situation coming up with that side of the ball moving forward in 2021, where you have James Conner's going to be a free agent, Juju Smith-Schuster's going to be a free agent. You have guys like Alejandro Villanueva who's going to be moving into free agency. You still have guys like Zach Banner and Matt Filer who are just on their 1 year, smaller tender deals. You have a lot of potential holes that are going to be opening up depending on how you choose to go about there. And I don't know how they feel about guys like James Conner and Juju long term, but those are things you have to consider when looking at this pick. If you can get a premier running back or a premier wide receiver that you feel can buffer those losses financially and production-wise on the field, you have to pull the trigger on that. Or offensive line-wise, because you are having an aging offensive line, and as much as we love guys like DeCastro and Big Al and Pouncey, there's going to come a time where you have to start ushering into the future of that offensive line. You've had a decade with them. They've done tremendous work. They've been one of the best O-lines in the league. But you can't ride on that forever. The guys get older and they start regressing, and then they ultimately retire. So I think realistically, those three positions should be the focal point. But they're going to be hard-pressed to pass up on a premier defender that's there. Just because your defense is settled in, you can't pass up on a guy just because, well, he's a premier safety. We don't need a safety, even though we go three safety deep sometime. And if a guy like, Xavier McKinney or Antoine Whitfield are sitting there, we're not going to take them because we have, the number 7 running back on the board that we'd rather take here. It's a very fine juggling act. And I think the Steelers have a position where they can handle that, but I think it should be geared towards the offensive side of the ball this year, just due to the fact that there's so many question marks in the future there.
Well, there's going to be a lot of listeners here who want to scapegoat Terrell Edmunds, and you got to understand he's only going to be entering his 3rd year. He's also a first-round draft pick who can still be playing here for another 2-3 seasons, and I don't think the team necessarily views him as being, as bad as, we say about draft Twitter. We'll just say Steelers Twitter, right? And we've talked about this too because there's an obvious lack in linebacker depth, inside linebacker depth, maybe even outside linebacker depth. But when you're looking at all of this, everybody that's pretty much a starter or main contributor, if you're going to draft somebody on defense, they're not going to see the field or shouldn't see the field a whole lot if everyone else is healthy. What is the window for a line? Let's say they take an inside linebacker. What kind of window are you looking at for an inside linebacker that's drafted with the 49th overall pick to get playing time? You got to see Vince Williams off in 2-3 years. So, now you're looking at this guy's rookie contract is almost up. When you're looking at safety, yeah, they need some depth there. But where are these guys more or less going to play? Probably a linebacker or a safety. We discussed this because we discussed Mark Barron and being on the field, and Jerry Dulac had something that he put out, where are they, on the Trib. And it was like, are they really going to have Edmonds playing Barron's role? I don't know. You're going to shuffle a guy around as much like that? Yeah, you're going to have the extra DBs, as you said. And I think we agreed on that as far as that goes, that, okay, Jerry's looking at it from a point of they need to take a safety so Edmonds can play Barron's role. And we're just thinking, okay, they just have DBs and they're just going to put one of the extra DBs on the field, no matter who that might be. It may not, and it may even be Ulysses Gilbert for all we know. I know you're very high on him. We feel the team's very high on him. And for all intents and purposes, as we look at this a week out, he's the top option at inside linebacker as far as depth is concerned right now, that Mark Barron and Tyler Matakevich are both, have gone on. Well, at least Tyler has. I don't think Barron's been signed anywhere just yet. So... No. There's a lot of things here where we're talking more or less depth. I think you bring up the very interesting point of offensive line getting older. I think if they end up getting somebody, let's say they get a guard, there's no guarantee that Stefan Wisniewski is going to start. You would assume, but there's no guarantee that he's going to start in that position, taking over for Ramon Foster at left guard. And he can also play center too. So if something happens with Pouncey, you're going to be shuffling the deck a little bit. You're going to be looking ahead at, Matt Filer was a restricted free agent. Zach Banner is a restricted free agent. You're talking about Al Villanueva potentially being up on his contract. So tackle is going to be something they're looking at in the future, whether they address that in-house, extend some guys, or they start looking at the draft. So I think an offensive lineman, for all intents and purposes, could be one of the first guys to get on the field. Now, wide receiver, I don't know, man. I think they got 3 guys kind of locked in. This could be a 4th. Obviously, you even got 4 if you think Ryan Switzer's going to make the roster. I like Deion Kane. That's a 5th guy. So your top 3 guys heading in this year are Juju, James Washington, Deontay Johnson. Do Washington and Johnson continue to climb, and does Juju have a rebound season? I believe Juju definitely will if Ben doesn't have a noodle arm, and Ben comes back and he's the same Big Ben. You're going to see some big things. You got to hope you're going to see bigger things. But as was the case of having somebody like Sammy Coates or Marcus Wheaton, if somebody's there, I think the Steelers could jump at that. Likewise, and I know Ryan Lippert will be maybe in disagreement over this since he's a big Kentucky fan, big Benny Snell fan. We don't know if Benny Snell is going to be the guy that would come right in and swoop in and takes James Conner's snaps. We assume a leap from year 1 to year 2, which is the norm at the running back position. So it isn't necessarily a dire need, but if they see a major upgrade there, and the Steelers have never been a team to do committee. Like Tomlin did it like in 2008 when they had Willie Parker, Mewelde Moore, guys like that. But as of late, it's been, the bell cow. You can't necessarily go to the early 2010s where they had once Mendenhall got hurt, it was never the same. It was like Ike Redmond and Baron Batch and whoever else. Felix Jones they picked up off the trash pile somewhere, and
which is why they ultimately ended up going with Le'Veon Bell in 2013. They wanted the gap. Exactly.
Yeah. And maybe even the same with Connor, because they realized Bell was we all realized it was right there at that precipice. So you're kind of at that same spot with Connor, but you have Snell there. And, it's not that I'm overlooking Jalen Samuels, but we know he's more of a utility. I don't want to call him a gadget guy, because he's certainly more than just a gadget player, but he has a specific function or role. He's not an every down back. So he's a guy that catches passes or you utilize, moving out into the slot or something of that nature. And so you have primarily just Benny Snell as the other guy. Do you roll into 2020 that way? I don't know. If you got somebody, me and Brian are the Ohio State guys. We throw J.K. Dobbins out there, but there's Cam Akers. There's a number of other guys that are big names. You did an entire podcast on this where I start to lean towards, do you do one of the skill positions? I'm definitely leaning towards offense because you got to take it from the standpoint of, I think the Steelers, I think Mike Tomlin and company, for the staff that's been there, have been burnt on running back more times than they would care to be. They were burnt when Bell they were burnt in that period of time, like I said, with Mendenhall getting hurt and trying to, squeeze what they could have out of guys like Ike Redmond, or they even brought in LaRod Stevens-Howling, who got hurt like in the very first game. They were trying to do different things. Dree Archer. They finally get Bell, and then Bell gets hurt several times, during his 4-year span under a rookie contract, and of course suspended as well. So he misses games. They get LeGarrette Blount. He leaves and quits. You end up with Ben Tate, who totally, chokes and pretty much costs them, I won't say single-handedly, but a very large portion of that playoff game. What was that, 2015 against the Ravens at home? And you had the season just go totally, in the toilet in one game, eliminated. So, and everybody's like, why don't they have a backup? And it's like they try and do these things, and it seems like it always ends up, biting them in the rear end. D'Angelo Williams was there for a little while. He was able to pick up the pace. Then he, too, got hurt. You go into Cincinnati with Jordan Todman and who am I missing? I'm missing or Fitzgerald Toussaint, and you have guys like that, and they've been going 3 deep or more. Kareth Wright carrying the ball last year. He's like 4 or 5 deep on the roster when it comes to running back due to injuries. So I start to lean more towards even. I know people might not necessarily say, oh, Ryan Switzer, this or that. He certainly has a defined role as a slot receiver. He's pretty much lost his role as a returner. He could be expendable. But, I think they have at least 5 dependable guys. Usually only 3 get on the field. If you have some injuries or something, I think Deion Kane or somebody come in. They signed some guys from like the XFL. They got some options there. And it's a deep wide receiver class where I start to lean more towards who's going to play now or who's the most immediate future need. And for me, I think it's either offensive line or running back.
Yeah, it's definitely there's a situation right now where you're like, where can these guys contribute? And I think there's some positions that will allow them to contribute more. And I know I've talked about it with Brian, but the way I look at that 49th pick, really the one position on the roster right now that doesn't have a settled in starter if you want to consider it, that is the nose tackle spot. I mean, that's, the spot is alleviated by Javon Hargrave. That's the one position. If they drafted a guy at any point, he would be in high contention to at least get a very solid look at that position because of the fact that they have Dan McCullers as the only true nose tackle. Chris Wormley has time there, and obviously they bump down Cam Hayward all the time. But he would have the front runner to be their base 3-4 nose tackle. That's really the only position where these guys are going to start. So it comes down to, like you said, where they view these guys now and the ability to get snaps. And I think you look at the receiver spot, it comes down to how they view Switzer. As much as Steelers fans want to act Switzer, he's been Ben's guy. They kept him around even when everyone thought they wouldn't. I think they have a plan for him. They want to at least give him one last opportunity to make his mark as a receiver in the slot because he's really the only true bona fide slot guy they have. And then, you have Deon Cain. Where does Deon Cain fit into this? Is he going to take a jump? They clearly saw enough to go after him and get him as opposed to, signing a free agent. They don't typically poach other teams' practice squads. So they knew what they had with him because they saw him. They scouted him when he was at Clemson. So you have guys like that. They could very easily make the jump and potentially take snaps away. And if they do that, you don't need to draft the guy. Because whoever they draft at receiver, you're looking at a guy who at the highest would probably be the receiver 4. But who knows, would probably end up starting behind Deon Cain just due to experience because how the Steelers operate. For a fact when it comes to the preseason big depth chart, he's going to be the 6th receiver on there no matter what. Drafting the first round, he's going to be that far down. So he's not going to get a lot of snaps right out of the gate. And same thing with running back. As long as James Conner is healthy, whether they draft a guy like Jonathan Taylor, Cam Akers, or J.K. Dobbins, he's going to be behind Conner. Conner is their guy as long as he's healthy. That's how they're going to operate. Now, the question is with that is, can he stay healthy? And like you said, how do they view Benny Snell? I think Benny Snell is a fine running back, but I think you're going to be tempered by his dynamic or his lack of a dynamic running attack. I think he's a downhill runner who's never going to get that second gear, and he's always going to try to run through. And I think he's good in certain situations, and he's a guy you want to have on your roster from a personality perspective, and that he is a decent running back, I think, with a decent ceiling. But is he ever going to be that dynamic, do-it-all running back you want? I don't know. It comes down to how the Steelers feel with that. And with the offensive line, obviously, I think that's the one position if you're looking at offense where the guy's going to have the opportunity to potentially contribute early on. I still am in the mindset that they're going to end up bumping either Matt Filer or Chukwuma Okorafor inside, and they're going to have one of the other guys start a tackle. I think that's going to be the Band-Aid that gets them through 2020 with Wisniewski needing to start when he can because he has experience starting if he needs to, and then have an offensive lineman work in there. In reality, if they draft an offensive lineman at that 49 spot, there's probably a good opportunity for them to get starting playing time earlier on due to the fact that there are so many holes and question marks, because there's still question marks with Zach Banner. There's still question marks with Chukwuma Okorafor. I don't think Wisniewski is anything more than just a versatile replacement with more experience and pedigree than B.J. Finney. So you have question marks there. So I think if you're looking for the true impact player, it's going to be offensive lineman, but what offensive lineman are going to be worth taking at 49? And that's the big question with them that they have to answer. It could be a guy like Cushenberry out of LSU. There could be a tackle that surprises people and gets picked at that spot. So it really comes down to what impact can they make. And I think on offense, you're going to be buried at one of those two positions. But that's why I believe if they're going to do anything right now, you're going to maximize the window beyond. That's why receiver and running back makes sense, because I think Conner is gone after this year. I think his inability to stay healthy consistently is going to make them very hesitant to want to dish out the money to him. And I think you have a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster, who we've talked about this. We have no idea what type of money he's going to garner. I think a lot of it's going to come down to if he can rebound and replicate what he did in 2018 this upcoming season. And if he does that, he's going to get a decent amount of money. But is it going to be from the Steelers, or are they going to dish that out to him? I don't know. So those are questions that they have to consider. I think how they go about with this first pick and the first couple picks actually is going to kind of be telling of how they feel about the long-term upside of having Conner and Juju on the roster. I think that's the biggest issue because, they have guys like Deontay Johnson, who I think is a star in the making. James Washington, I think, is going to be a very good piece. I don't think he'll ever be the guy, but he's going to be a very good piece to have on an offense that you need to fill out your wide receiver depth chart. And Deon Cain is a pedigree guy, in my opinion. I was very high on coming out, and I think that he has the opportunity to make an impact. So how they address that is going to be very telling. And honestly, maybe defense, if they're looking for an impact starter, offensive line or someone on defense, will probably be the one to look at, because if they can get a third safety if they can get a versatile defensive lineman that can fill in there, or even a guy to compete with Ulysses Gilbert, they rotate their linebackers. Vince Williams is not going to be on the field on passing downs. They're going to have someone else on the field in those situations. Could that be a third linebacker they draft this year, like a Malik Harrison or something like that if he's sitting there, or Troy Dye? Or could they draft a safety that's going to roll in and come down in the box sometimes? So there's a lot of question marks about how these guys are going to fit in, and I really don't see anyone in this class unless they get a premier guy that falls unexpectedly, or there's just some injury that happens. I really don't view that any of these guys are going to come in and really make an impact early on year one, because I really don't see there being any true starting availability open without injuries occurring. I think offensive line and defensive line are the two spots where you could see it the most likely. But receiver and running back, those depth charts right now are pretty much set with their starters, and I don't see a premier pick at 49. I think a guy like T. Higgins, who I'm very high on, or a guy like Van Jefferson or Courtney Davis, even a guy like Jalen Reagor, I don't think they push for immediate starting time at receiver, because there's a lot of variables that go into that. Your chemistry with Ben, how well are you adapting to NFL passing games and things like that? You can't just assume that they draft the guy 49, he's going to push over all these guys and just become the instant number 2 or number 3. So I think none of these guys are going to make the impact that we want to see them make, and we're used to seeing recently with guys like Devin Bush and Deontay Johnson and Juju coming on, and T.J. Watt, where they burst onto the scene in year one. They're producing and contributing early on. I don't see that being the case this year, and I think that's going to potentially and disappoint some fans. I really think this draft class is going to be for the long haul of trying to fill in some of these holes that are going to be vacant all of a sudden come 2021 and beyond.
Well, I don't know that if Juju isn't banged up, I don't know how much you see Deontay Johnson. If Antonio Brown doesn't leave town, I don't know how much you see Deontay Johnson. Don't forget Dante Moncrief, not only by virtue of not being able to catch a ball for whatever injuries with his hands that we thought maybe he had, but also because of the compensatory pick formula. When you look at this is kind of crazy, because the Steelers, they were sitting here 49. They would go from 49 to 124 if they had not gotten rid of Dante Moncrief. That's a long time to wait. In fact, we were talking about this. I started to talk about this was the first day of the draft. All we're going to be doing is watching the virtual presentations. The Steelers don't have any ammo to move up. No matter what people think about. I love when people are like, just trade Mason Rudolph. And what are you going to give for him?
First round pick, obviously, Joe.
Oh yeah. If you think he sucks so bad that you don't want him on your team, why would somebody else want the guy that you think sucks and use their first round pick that they could use on somebody else that could be better? It's just stupidity. It bothers me greatly, and I don't think that that's somebody that you've put time and investment into over the last 2 seasons and in the third round pick, no less, and had a higher grade on him to just ship him off for, let's say, a 6th round pick or a conditional 6th or something. Oh yeah, they got a 5th for Josh Dobbs. Well, then again, the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Houston Texans haven't necessarily made the wisest of decisions with some of these trades either. So, or Chucky, we made fun of Chucky for, Martavis Bryant. And I remember everybody was all on us too about what they got for Antonio Brown, and they sure looks like the Steelers won that deal too. So we'll leave that at that. But I don't think we're talking about any of this if James Conner had stayed healthy, and I really don't know where it goes if he does stay healthy, other than whoever you take probably takes a back seat. I don't know if they're going to do any type of timeshare, but if they end up investing that pick 49 on a running back, you have to think that guy gets on the field sooner rather than later. Although, even with Le'Veon Bell, I still think there was hope they could have kept Bell, but they drafted Connor and had him kind of seasoned for a year, let him sit there and simmer before he assumed the main role, and you could see something similar to that. I wouldn't necessarily think it's a wasted pick whatsoever, but I do think we're in agreement on offense. The defensive line, I don't know, man. I don't even think about defensive line or nose tackle, and I think you pointed out I think you pointed out in the back rooms, was it Chris Wormley you said was on the roster, the official Steelers roster, listed as what, just DL?
No, he's listed as nose tackle.
Oh, he's listed as nose tackle. Actually listed as nose tackle because it was Colbert that came out and said that they weren't looking to use him as a nose tackle, wasn't it?
Yep.
We heard it somewhere. Yeah. I mean, it's just, I don't know. Maybe a bad web developer or somebody, a typo. Who knows? Or it just carries over. Maybe it carries over. Maybe all these guys are just in a database, and you just click their name, and it adds it to because it's all like interweaved and tied together. All the member club websites. But anyways, you go from 49 to 102. And if we're saying you're going to go. I don't know. Would you be leaning running back more? We see some of these different rounds. You think maybe you could get one of these guys in the third round. So maybe, I don't know, Lloyd Cushenberry, that wouldn't bother me necessarily. That would be a pretty big surprise. I wouldn't mind that whatsoever, somebody in that type of category. I think they're going to be really moving pieces around and trying to figure out what's going to be their best offensive line outside of left tackle, center, and right guard, right? It's really that right tackle and left guard spot that they're going to be moving people around. I mean, almost everyone they have at the moment is position flexible. You even talked about whether a core of 4 could be moved into guard as well. I mean, it's a mystery right now. We'll see how that ends up playing out. But they could definitely use some young blood in there because most of their guys over the years have been Ramon Foster was undrafted, Villanueva was undrafted, Filer undrafted. So these are all guys they've been getting by with as their offensive linemen and not really investing the high draft picks as they used to. You look back at, like I said, over 18th overall was Marquise Pouncey. Marcus Gilbert, second-round pick, number 63. That's the type of guy you could get there. So just keep that one in mind. And, of course, DeCastro was 24th overall. But then again, you look at the second round, Mike Adams was 56. Didn't work out. So you just never know where that's going to go. And that's true of any players, but I just wanted to point that out. I don't know. I think we're leaning offense. So, I mean, when you get into the third round, this is where it starts to influence you is, okay, let's say if you take a wide receiver, you don't have to worry about taking a wide receiver later in what is a deep class, right?
Yeah.
But if you go running back, you may not have to go wide receiver even in the third round. You could probably find somebody in the fourth too, with how deep these things are going. Maybe even later. I mean, a guy like Deion Kane was a 6th round pick, right? So you look at this and you go from 49 to 102, and then it's 124, 135, and then there's no 5th round pick. It goes all the way to 198. So you got a small, there's a small focus. The spotlight is on this area of about 30 picks between the end of the 3rd round and through the 4th round, where the Steelers are going to, Kevin Colbert, this front office is really going to have to earn their keep, right? So that top pick is going to mean a lot to which of these guys you think, which of these positions and what type of talent is available when you go another 50 picks until you get the pick again. That's where I'm stuck, man. That's where I think even offensive line could go, because maybe you find a running back at 102 and you find a receiver at 124 or 135, and you may even be able to find one of these guys that could be like a dime backer or like a third safety on the field there in the 4th round, maybe even the 6th. But when we're starting to talk 6th, most of these guys we're talking as being special teamers, as rookies, maybe second-year players anyways. But when you get in the 6th and 7th round, these are guys that, especially on this roster, are really going to be fighting to try and make the team.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the Steelers will be benefited from that because you have a deep receiver class. I mean, everyone's been talking about this receiver class now for over a year, about how potentially deep it was and how deep it is going to. And obviously, is every receiver in this class going to turn into a Pro Bowler? No. There's going to be guys that have been highly acclaimed that turn into busts and disappoint, because you can't – if every player from every class turned into a stud, then there'd be nothing to talk about, you know. So I think realistically – this class is deep enough, though. The Steelers have had such a history of selecting receiver. That's why I really don't think they go that route at 49. I don't think they're going to push the envelope for a guy when they've done so well drafting between, the 2nd and the 4th round. I don't think there's a need to draft one in the 2nd round. They drafted Juju in the 2nd round. There were concerns about Martavis Bryant, and you already had Antonio Brown, but you didn't have a true number 2 receiver. They have 3 guys on the roster now, so I understand why they'd want to wait. But unless someone blows them away that they don't think is supposed to be, they're like, humor me, if there's a guy like Henry Ruggs that falls to 49, first of all, there's 31 GMs that deserve to be fired. Second of all, the Steelers would be sprinting to the podium to get his name in there.
Virtually sprinting. Maybe
sprinting, yes.
Somebody's using the bathroom, they have their iPad with them, and you just hear something.
They have the toilet paper stuck to their shoe. They're trying to fly in there to pound in to call the league. But I think they're going to be they have to be blown away from that. So honestly, that's why I haven't mocked a receiver at 49 in a while, because I really don't think that's the direction they go. My heart still tells me running back and inside or interior offensive line, because I think there's I think realistically, running back and offensive line, there typically ends up being a drop-off. You want to get one of the premier guys, and the guys that typically fall are the guys that have some major limitation in their game. So I think either one of them makes sense to go after early. I think after the top 6 running backs, which has been pretty much a consensus now, pretty much which order you have them in is different, but there is a typical drop-off. Those guys are typically more niche running backs. They don't really fit all the roles you want as an every down back. And there's going to be someone that gets drafted on day 3 at running back that turns into an unexpected, cowbell running back. But you can't bank on that unless you have some sort of, soothsayer that's in your draft room that can predict a guy that had no business being in that position being there. So I think realistically, it makes sense for them to go in those directions. I think the fact that this draft is deep at the positions that are important to the Steelers, like offensive tackle and receiver, and even some positions like interior defensive line, I think they can afford to wait and get guys because the position they need on the D-line isn't a defensive end. It's not a defensive tackle. It's a nose tackle. Guys like Benito Jones and Leki Fotu aren't going to be there. Are going to be there in the mid rounds because they're not at a premium position. You don't see nose tackles getting drafted extraordinarily early like they used to. So I think they have a position to potentially wait back and get a guy like that later on if they need to. But I still think you have to consider what your big board looks like, where these guys fit into your big board, and do they think there's a drop off? Maybe the Steelers don't think there's a drop off at running back, and they can go after a guy. They met with Darrington Evans. He's a guy that should be there in the 4th round. Maybe they wait for a guy like him because they don't think he's much different from the guys like Cam Akers and Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor. And draft Twitter has it wrong. The Steelers have a feel for that stuff. They're going to wait and see who's there when, but that huge gap in waiting for picks is going to be daunting for them because once they get to the 2nd and the 3rd and 4th round, they have some picks clustered together. They don't have to wait that long. I mean, they have 3 picks within 35 selections. It's like that's not or 33 selections. That's not a bad deal to have. But that would wait between 49 and 102. I mean, I know I'm going to be sitting here just agonizing over who's available. I can only imagine how a team that actually gets paid to deal with that is going to handle it. So, I think how they gauge how their big board is set up and how they feel about these classes. Maybe they don't feel as high on this running back class as people do. Maybe they feel not as high as this receivers class after they got the chance to meet with some of these guys and watch the film. So that's all going to be taken into consideration, and I think on my gut, I've prepared myself at this point to be surprised with who they pick at 49.
Yeah.
My gut tells me it's going to be someone that no one's talked about with the Steelers. It's going to be someone that no one thought they'd ever have interest in or was never going to be there. Because every year, I know that we
Juju.
Exactly. I never even pegged a Juju because I never thought he was on the roster. I never thought he would be there. And I'm not going to lie, I wasn't overly fond of the pick. I was wrong, and I'm glad I was wrong. But, I think realistically you look at it, the Steelers make surprise moves every year. No one thought they'd trade up for Devin Bush. They did that. No one thought Deontay Johnson should go in the 3rd round. I certainly didn't. And they did it anyway. So the Steelers were such an unpredictable team. Everyone thought they were going to take Eddie Lacy. They ended up going with Le'Veon Bell. That's the big one I think that should come to everyone's mind is no one thought Le'Veon Bell would be that early of a running back. It was Giovanni Bernard, him, and then Eddie Lacy. I think that worked out well for the Steelers and now the Jets over Eddie Lacy and Giovanni Bernard. But I think the Steelers have such a unique way of going about the draft. They find guys that no one else really expects, and they find ways to make them into players. They'll get bashed for players like Jarvis Jones and Artie Burns and even a guy like Terrell Edmonds, who's still too young to tell, in my opinion. They, by and large, have success with their earlier round picks, especially in the 2nd round. The Steelers nail their 2nd round picks a lot of the time, and I think that is a good omen, hopefully, for them to get a guy that maybe would never be expected to be there. And, there's the tweet that came out, I forget, I think it was you said Daniel Jeremiah or whomever it was that was saying how, or no, it was, forget his name, about how, you have all these guys that can go in the 20s that realistically could still be there at 40 and vice versa. Guys we have pegged in the 40s to 60s that are going to be there in the 20s. I think there's a lot of parity every year, but with this year being such a unique situation, there's going to be guys that fall through the cracks that the Steelers will be happily able to catch up and swoop onto their roster. So I'm prepared to be surprised. I have my choice picks. I know I've been very vocal about who I'd like to see there and who I expect to see there. I'm fully prepared that come Friday night, I'm going to be extraordinarily disappointed or just surprised with who they end up going with because it would be someone that no one ever expected to be taken at that spot. But I'm not going to bash it until I see how they come on the field and produce because the whole notion of bashing prospects before they have the opportunity to actually prove themselves in the NFL, I think, is bogus. You can bash the positional need, that's fine, but don't bash the player until he has a chance to prove himself. A player could be bad in college and turn it on in the NFL and vice versa. So give them an opportunity to actually see what they're going to do before you bash the pick. But
you never know, like small colleges either. You know, the Steelers always tend to find guys out of smaller colleges, or particularly even the MAC.
Yeah, and they're guys that you never thought would be studs in the NFL, and then they turn into Antonio Brown or the trajectory that Deontay Johnson or someone like that's on, or even, Chukuma Okorafor is potentially going to be starting coming out of Western Michigan. You have guys that you never thought would be the guy that turned into the guy. So give them some time to develop before you start sitting there writing them off as busts or saying it's a dumb pick because because the guy that you wanted the team to take was on the board and the Steelers didn't take him or any team didn't take him. So it's going to be a unique situation. I think the Steelers have flexibility. I think there's positions. That's why I haven't mocked the receiver for that reason, because I think it's a deep enough class they can wait. I don't like many of the tight ends in the class have been pretty vocal about that.
You know what? I don't see a tight end at all. We kind of glossed over that, but after adding Ebron, there's absolutely I guess if there was nothing else there, let's say Moss was sitting there round 4, 135. Is it somebody that would you even like consider, because obviously he could be an upgrade over Zach Gentry. You're talking about tight end 3 right now, and you're talking about Vance McDonald or Eric Ebron with like a year or 2 on their contract, somebody you could groom. Jesse James came in as the tight end 3 very late as a 5th round pick. I could see it maybe, but it's not necessarily. It's not going to be a need. It's going to be a best player available. Which we were hitting on this. We're saying okay, maybe offensive line, maybe running back. We're talking pick 49, pick 102. Maybe there's a receiver in the 4th round. They have 6 picks, okay? A second rounder, a third round compensatory pick at 102. They have 124 and 135 in the 4th round, 198 in the 6th, so another big long gap, and then the 7th round, 232. So it'll feel like last year when there wasn't a second round pick, you're going to be waiting, except you won't have the excitement of moving up and getting Devin Bush. So you're going to be sitting around waiting until Friday for the Steelers to pick somebody, and then, it may not, you're going to get offended. It may not be the sexy pick. It's going to be like a lineman, and nobody's ever heard of this guy except for us, and we'll be excited about it, but everybody else is just going to be like, it's not going to push jersey sales or anything of that nature, you know what I mean? So just how many of these picks of the 6 do you see going toward offense? We've talked offensive line, we've talked wide receiver, we've talked running back, we will not discuss quarterback. So I mean, there's 3 right there, and could they double dip? Because I still think they may want to add somebody that could be an edge rusher later in the draft. I don't know necessarily if the kid from North Dakota State is a fit, but hey, in the mocks, he's showing up in 6th, 7th rounds. You just never know. Could be somebody like a Sutton Smith who just couldn't stick, or it could be somebody that ends up, making the team and at least being somebody that's an option as a backup, because right now you get undrafted guys. You get Tuzar Skipper, who wasn't even on the team for portions last year. Really had to fight his way on. Wasn't even playing special teams in preseason. That's how really I don't think they was that highly thought of. If you got Ola playing special teams, because that's where they need that extra body that's going to be active on game day, let alone as a reserve outside linebacker or edge rusher. And, of course, we were talking about how comfortable do you really feel with Jordan Dangerfield and Marcus Allen as your backup safeties to Minkah Fitzpatrick and Terrell Edmonds. So, I said how many on offense, because are you going to go 2 in a row, 3 in a row, 4 in a row on offense, and then you're only filling in the depth spots with those 6th and 7th round picks? I could see anywhere. Like you said, I don't know about 49. I think 49's locked into offense. 102, maybe defense, but I think one of those 2 4th-round picks has to go defense.
Yeah, I actually, if I had to guess right now, my gut's going to tell me it's going to be 3-3 split, but the premium picks are going to be more to the offensive side. I really don't see a scenario unless someone blows them away at 49 on defense. I think it's going to be an offensive player. I think they recognize the fact that they need to add talent and support to Ben over the next 2 years if he's going to stick this out, and I think they need to add talent there. And I think they've put so much resources into this defense, but you also can't get in a position where you start ignoring the defense just because you have talent, because they have guys like, Cam Hayward's getting older, and I don't think he's reached his peak yet, but I think he's getting older, and you have to take into consideration he has a new contract hopefully coming up. You have Joe Hayden, who's not going to play forever. You had to address the inside linebacker at some point in the draft because you can't go into camp next year with just Devin Bush, Vance Williams, Ulysses Gilbert, and Robert Spillane. You have to have another body in there to at least add competition, unless you really feel that good about Robert Spillane. So I think realistically, you can't neglect the defense. So I really think they're going to try to split this 3-3 so they can get some fresh blood on both sides of the ball. If they split it any other way, I think it would be 4-2 in favor of offense. I don't see a situation right now, unless they get blown away with absolutely tremendous value, where they go more defensive. They go 4-2 or 5-1 in favor of defense, because I don't think they can afford it. They've neglected the offense premium pick-wise in the top 2 rounds a little bit longer than you would expect them to. Obviously they've made picks, like Juju was a second-round pick, obviously. But I just think they need to add more blood there. They need to get fresh bodies. They need to look into the future with free agency, and I think that's going to entail them going 3-3 or 4-2 in favor of offense. I really just think that's the way this is gauging. You look at the guys they met with that have been reported. There's a lot of offensive flavor with that, and I just think that makes the most sense for right now. You can't, like I said, you can't keep pouring all of your resources into the defense, because eventually the offense is going to start falling behind. And even though Ben was a big part of that last year, whenever he got hurt, we saw the lack of depth and the lack of talent they had around that once he did go down, and other players started falling. You can't expect to be 5 deep at every position, but you hope to get at least past the starter to have some quality depth there, So I think realistically it has to be offense. I'd be surprised if it was any other thing than 3-3 or 4-2, because I still think they need to keep adding bodies on defense for depth purposes and just long-term developmental prospects. So that's where my gut's telling me right now.
Well, I think a lot of people think too. I think we're in agreement. They can't move up. They won't move up.
No.
And they would have to mortgage a pick in the future here, and they may have some compensatory picks coming for next season too, depending on some other things. But here's the other part of this: is a lot of people just assume you could trade back and acquire more picks. I don't know how content they're going to feel to. They're already waiting forever here. You're going to go from 49 to what? Like next, if you were to move back from the second round, you would have to, I would think you would have to add like at least something in the 5th round to kind of buffer between 135 and 198. And you can't, and I don't think you could fall too far back from 49. You look at some of the teams maybe that you could swap with. I mean, right behind them at 50 and going on, you get the Bears, Cowboys, Rams, Eagles, Bills, Ravens probably won't be a trade partner for obvious reasons. Dolphins, Texans, Vikings, Seahawks, Ravens again, Titans, Packers, Chiefs, Seahawks again. Seahawks are always the team that likes to move back themselves. I don't see them jumping up. They're more willing to move back. And then that's it. That's it for that round. And it's like, I didn't look and see what some of these other teams have as far as picks, but you see a little bit of a logjam there within teams within the same division, and whether or not they would want to leapfrog one another. But other than that, like, how far back are you willing to go? Or even the guys that are in the top of the 3rd round, the Bengals have a boatload of picks. They're an interdivisional team rival. I wouldn't do that. Redskins, Lions, Jets, Panthers, Dolphins have already been a partner of theirs. Chargers, Cardinals, Jaguars, et cetera, as you keep going. So, I don't necessarily know that they add much in terms of draft capital unless there's a player trade. And I don't know who's sitting there, and it's really somebody that Martavis Bryant was like something where, it kind of surprised you, but then again, it didn't. And I don't know that they have somebody like that they could dangle as a carrot and get something. Definitely maybe not a 3rd rounder or anything like that. A lot of people are like, oh, well, what if they drafted J.K. Dobbins? Would they trade James Conner? Well, who wants a guy that's been injured seriously in each of the last 2 seasons, missed time, and is in the final year of a rookie deal, when you could just maybe take somebody in the 4th or 5th round that could fill that same need? So I don't think he necessarily garners the type of trade value where somebody would just think, oh, well, you could just ship him away. And anybody else that's been sitting there, it's not a starter, isn't necessarily going to be super valuable either. I mean, they were able to do something with Gerald Hawkins because he was developmental. They had an awful lot of bodies in that room with the offensive line that, he was expendable. Or Marcus Gilbert, who had been quite frequently injured and had lost his job. I don't see the same kind of scenario playing out anywhere else on either side of the ball, to be completely honest, where they could move somebody. Obviously, somebody will say Rudolph or Duck Hodges maybe, and I don't see it. They'll just wait for them to cut the guy and then get him later on. They're not going to give up any draft capital for that. So I don't see them necessarily adding adding more picks. I don't know necessarily. I don't see any way that they trade back. I think it's interesting how you said they could split up some of this. I don't disagree. I just wonder how they split it up. I tend to see the late round picks more defensive focused, because that's where you find guys like a Tyler Matakevich or a Dan McCullers or something like that are going to fill the depth areas where you have a need at the moment on defense. The other guys may need to be able to step in right away. So I see it kind of like shaking out in that sort of direction. I have one more point too, Zach, but I know we're up against it, and I totally forgot what I was going to say.
Yeah, it's I think it's going to be an exciting draft. I think the Steelers are in a really unique situation, like I said, where they can kind of go a lot of different directions, and I really don't think any direction right now is going to be wrong unless they draft a quarterback first, tight end second, and a punter third. I really don't think there's going to be any situation where it's going to be a uniquely wrong scenario. I think it's a lot going to be seeing who they take and then waiting to see what type of impact they make. I think the Steelers have done well finding talent when you wouldn't expect them to find talent, and they've done well developing some of these guys, especially the players that come in the middle rounds that are looking to develop a role on offense. They've drafted very well on that side of the ball, and I think that should continue. I'm excited to see where it all pans out for them, because I think they have they're looking for 2020 right now. They're trying to maximize Ben's window because, face it, he's not going to play forever. And, there's a situation where they'd like to get one more championship run with Ben, and you have to maximize the talent around there, and I think that gets the guys you need to have on offense to develop now in 2020 and not have a fall off in 2021 if, in fact, Connor and Juju both walk. And, you want to keep adding on that defense to make your strength stronger. Don't make that a weakness because you don't want to pay attention to it. You have a very top-tier elite defense. Keep adding to it. Make them still one of the most ferocious defenses to play against, where you have guys swarming to the ball, picking it off, sacking the quarterback. Keep adding to that to make Ben's life even easier, to really give yourself an opportunity to compete in the AFC North, to knock the Ravens off, and to put yourself in a position where you're looking at another Lombardi coming back to the Steel City. So I think I'm excited to see this draft. I have no idea what's going to happen. Normally we have an idea of who they're going after because we get the full list of the pre-draft visits and who they went out to dinner with at pro days and whatnot.
Yeah.
There's been such a limited hush-hush about that with the Steelers because they don't advertise that stuff. There's been a couple of leaks from players saying who they've met with, but that's basically it. And a lot of the guys that have announced those are late-round guys anyway. So, I don't know what direction they're going to go in, but I'm excited for it nonetheless. It's a great time of the year,
Yeah.
It's an exciting time every year.
It is. And you know what I remembered? You gave me one of two, and I remembered the other one I was going to say. Do you think they double dip at any positions?
If they trade back, I wouldn't be surprised if they did. The only position I can see them double dipping would be like offensive line. If they go to interior offensive lineman, offensive tackle, that's the only position grouping I can see them kind of double dipping. Otherwise, I don't think they have the capital to take multiple receivers or multiple linebackers or DBs. So I think if they go DB, it's going to be either a safety or a cornerback. Probably the Steelers love guys like Cam Sutton who can do it all. Mike Hilton has shown a penchant to be able to play safety when he needs to. So I think they'll go for a versatile guy. They're not going to draft multiple linebackers. They're either going to draft an edge or a linebacker, an inside guy, in my opinion. I love how edge is the one position group that no one talks about now that since Bud Dupree has his franchise tag. So who knows? Maybe they'll go early with there. That's a position group that we've been forgetting about lately because of that franchise tag. But I don't see a position group where they double dip unless it's offensive line, just because of the fact that they don't have the capital to do it. Even if they do trade back, it's going to be to address another position, not double dip at one group. So, last year they were fortunate to have enough picks they could double dip at linebacker with, Gilbert and Bush. And if you want to consider Sutton Smith in that category as well, you can. I don't see that being the likelihood this year. No.
Yeah, and I don't get too bent out of shape over whatever darts they throw. The other thing was like if they went punter, well, maybe not like in the second, third, or fourth round, but I don't know, sixth or seventh. There's a lot of people who aren't happy with how Jordan Berry played last year, but I still tend to think that that's an avenue they usually go UDFA on, and the UDFA thing is going to be a complete crapshoot. We heard Kevin Colbert talk about wanting to add more rounds to the draft because of that, so it's going to be a scramble for guys there. I imagine they bring somebody to camp, but if you go all the way back the last 10 years or so, okay, your 6th and 7th rounders. Here's one I forgot about: Jonathan Dwyer, a running back; Antonio Brown, Doug Worthington, a defensive tackle. For those of you who have forgotten, Keith Williams, a guard; Baron Batch, a running back. They had 4 7th-round picks in 2012. Tony Clemens, a wide receiver; David Paulson, a tight end; Terrence Frederick, the DB, and then Kelvin Beachum at 248 carved out a pretty nice career as a left tackle. Nice surprise there, and you'll have some of that. Justin Brown, a wide receiver; Vince Williams, as we're talking about, linebacker; Nick Williams, a defensive tackle in the 7th round out of Samford.
He's still playing around too. That's the thing with Nick. He's still in the league too.
Yeah, he's still playing. Jordan Zumwalt, guy that was always hurt, just never really got a shake in camp or anything. Linebacker out of UCLA. Dan McCullers, Rob Blanchflower, a tight end from UMass, who just like the following year, 2015, 7th-round pick Jared Holloman, a safety out of Louisville. Neither of those guys really got to sniff the NFL roster. That same 2015 year, however, L.T. Walton and Anthony Chickalo, they stuck around, played for a few years. You see mostly the kind of role that I'm talking about here now, the pattern that starts to fit. Travis Feeney, DeMarcus Ayers, Tyler Matakevich, 2016. Colin Holba, a long snapper, didn't even make the roster. Keon Adams, outside linebacker, edge rusher, 2017 in the 7th round out of Western Michigan. 2018, they didn't have a 6th. 7th round was the... what do you want to call him? The machine, Josh Frazier, defensive tackle from Alabama, who I think was a shoo-in. This was one of the position coach picks, right? This was a Carl Dunbar guy, so they threw a flyer, which is why I posed the question of, could they do a punter? Could they throw Danny Smith a bone? I think they got Deontay Johnson. I don't think they're going to move. They're going to look at anything else there this year. I don't think they have the capital to anyways, but 3 6th-round picks and a 7th in last year's draft between Sutton Smith, Isaiah Buggs, Ulysses Gilbert, and Derwin Gray, and they're still, these are young guys developing 3 out of the 4 with Sutton Smith, obviously. He was on and off the practice squad, though, last year, but just I don't know if injuries necessarily derailed him or what, or if he just felt that he wasn't a fit. He was kind of an odd size to be able to go defensive end in FCS college, right? It was a MAC. He was a MAC guy, Northern Illinois. And move out the outside linebacker or whatever be the case. I just don't think he ever found his role in what short period of time they had to evaluate, and they had a boatload of picks last year, of which they, shipped a couple of them away in order to get Devin Bush at the top of that. So you see what these late rounds end up being. Hey, if they threw a dart at a punter, I think some people would probably be upset. I think some people would be like, "Yay, Jordan Berry's gone." There's just absolutely no guarantee that guy will end up being a guy, end up even being a long-term professional football player, just the way all of these things end up panning out. But, you do get some guys that get drafted, and, as far as punters or anything like that, I was trying to find, maybe it wasn't, I was trying to find some of the punters from last year, and I've totally drawn a blank. There aren't many that go, needless to say. What, like 2, 3, 4 if they end up getting picked? And it's more or less just securing a spot so you don't have to do the crapshoot that is the undrafted college free agent route.
Yeah, and a lot of the times those are the guys that have the extra capital. They're the teams that have the 14 picks, the 9 picks or whatever, even a full gauntlet of 7 picks. They're the ones that can afford to make that move if they really feel they have no other needs elsewhere, and they really feel their punter position is as dire as it is. That's what ultimately led to the Steelers drafting Daniel Sepulveda, who I think, if it wasn't for the linebacker style of play that he had as a punter, that he'd probably still be in the league at this point in time. He was a 2-time Ray Guy Award winner, and he was a really solid pick for them in the 4th round as a punter, and I thought he was going to be a guy for them. And multiple torn ACLs later, you can't stay on the field, and your best ability is your availability, and he didn't have that. So I think that kind of plagued him. But unless it's a guy like that, you don't often see guys getting drafted early on, especially now you see teams like the Bengals drafting Roberto Aguayo as a kicker in the 2nd round, and he ends up being off the roster in 1 year. So I think that's kind of the teams you see the most likely to take a special teams player like that, like a long snapper. Even when the Steelers took Colin Holba, it was a need, whether teams wanted to be here or not. Greg Warren had left and rode off into the sunset. They'd had inconsistent play there, and they wanted to get a guy. And Colin Holba, like it or not, had a draftable grade. I actually had a draftable grade on him in that year. Long snappers are players too, and you see what happens when you don't have one. Whenever Greg Warren got hurt and James Harrison became the long snapper, game melted away because of one easy snap. no one loves the long snapper until they don't have one. And I think that's what the route the Steelers were going for. And it was a 6th-round pick. And obviously, they ended up finding Cameron Gameday, and he ended up being the guy and just signed the 2-year deal. So it worked out for them. They gave him the competition they needed. And Colin Holba, I think, got picked up by the Jaguars shortly thereafter. So they have guys that, that think they can contribute. And if a punter is the move they want to go and they're not happy with Jordan Berry, you can be upset with it all you want to, but then you don't have the opportunity to complain about Jordan Berry every single year like fans like to do. Even though I don't see it as warranted as fans like to make it to be. That's neither here nor there. But you have no idea. Teams. I don't think the Steelers do that because they don't have the capital and they have bigger fish to fry elsewhere. But I think realistically, if they had more picks, I think it'd be very much on the table until they find some level of consistency at that position.
Absolutely. Well, we're up against it, Zach, even over it. And, I looked back, 2 punters, 2 kickers last year that were drafted, 1 in the 4th round and 3 in the 5th round. So interesting stuff. And for Colin Holba, he's been off and on from the Steelers camp. He went to the Jaguars for a year, San Francisco for a year, and then split time with the 49ers and the Giants last year. And some of that's injury related, either himself or the guy that's already entrenched. Much like kickers, it's very volatile, and they got like a short list of guys who are available, staying in shape, et cetera, ready to fly out and play wherever within 3-4 days, should they not have their regular starter in place. So it's something where you got young blood coming in right behind them, and it's tough. It's just one of those things that might not shake out for certain players, unfortunately. So, but it did shake out for us today. Thanks for joining me once again, my friend.
Always a pleasure. I'm excited for this whole draft shindig to get underway. It's the best time of the year, and no one will ever change my mind on that stance.
No, the most wonderful time of the year is Christmas, man.
Oh, that's also fair. That's also fair.
But it's like Christmas, but just in April. So
with no personal gifts for me, just a pure gift of enjoyment to see the Steelers draft some people.
Yes, well, that's the gift that keeps on giving, right? So,
yes,
and speaking of that, too, folks, if you're looking for some gifts for people, don't forget about the Jacksonville Gameday Tailgate experience. Shoot us a message. Look in the show notes. We got some contact information there as well. Also, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We see all these comments. We're flying by the seat of our pants here, wearing many hats as we continue to stay safe at home. We hope you're doing the same. Until next time, my name's Joe. His name is Zach, and we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.